I call this Altoona City Council meeting to order Monday, February 8th. We'll now have a moment of silent prayer. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a presentation on the agenda tonight. If Chief Freeling would please join me at the podium. Sorry, got ahead of myself
Take a
there.
roll call real quickly.
Linda, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Vice Mayor Butterbaugh.
Here.
Councilman Kashadi.
Here.
Councilman Carper.
Here.
Councilman Ickes.
Here.
Councilwoman Jordan is absent. Councilman Kelly.
Here.
Mayor Pacifico.
Here. Chief, on behalf of City Council and the City of Altoona, it is a great honor to present you with this plaque for your 44 years of service to the Altoona Police Department, including 20 years as chief. So thank you very much for all that you've done for the city.
Okay. I want to say it's been a long journey. And whoever would have thought my last year of working, I'd be wearing a mask, attending Zoom meetings, and sitting in the back room at council meetings at the kids' table, as we call it. You know, I've worked under a lot of different forms of government for a lot of mayors, city councils, city managers. I've worked with a lot of different department heads and a lot of city employees. And I want to thank everyone for the opportunities that have been given to me over the years and for the friendships that I've formed with everyone. It hasn't always been a smooth journey. Along every road we travel in life, there's going to be potholes, bumps, and a lot of rocky roads. And Lord knows I've been battered and bruised quite a few times over the years. But one thing I have learned is it's not always what happens, it's how you handle what happens that matters. I want you to know you have a great police department. I would put them up against any police department in this state. They come to work, both sworn and civilian personnel. They work hard every day to provide good service and keep this city safe. I'm certainly proud of them, and you can be proud of them as well. In fact, you can be proud of all the city departments. The employees are great. They all work very hard, and it's something that makes Altoona great. Your employees are the city's greatest asset, and you, as city leaders, should appreciate them and support them. With all that being said, I do want to thank the citizens of Altoona. They are great people, they're hardworking, they're caring, and it's been my honor and privilege to serve them for 44 years, and I thank them for a lot of great memories. Thank you.
Okay, before we get into the public comment, I would like to announce that we had 2 executive sessions, one on January 14th, one on January 24th. Both were for personnel. Also, I would like to announce the nominations for the Water Authority and the Amtran vacancies. So the first one for the Water Authority would be Jack Spees, and for Amtran, Larry Bellato. And at this time, we will now open up the floor for public comment. If you would like to address council, you could do so by dialing the number that is on the screen. And when it is your turn, please announce your name and address for the record. And we ask that you keep your comments to under 5 minutes. The floor is now open. Okay, we will close the floor for public comment and move on to the resolutions. Linda?
Item A is approving the minutes of the Altoona City Council meeting held Monday, January 11th, 2021. Item B is appointing Jack Spees to the Altoona Water Authority to fill the unexpired term of Frank Ake. Said term shall expire the first Monday of January 2023. Item C is appointing Larry Bellato to the Amtran Authority to fill the unexpired term of Michael Robinson. Said term shall expire the first Monday of January 2024. Item D is awarding a demolition contract to Earth Movers Unlimited of Kylertown, PA for demolition of the following properties: 2024 Fifth Avenue, 723 First Avenue, 202 to 04 Willow Avenue, 1005 Fifth Avenue, 2409 Oak Avenue, 2409 Oak Avenue Rear, 1616 11th Street, 1609 17th Avenue, 909 27th Street, and 1914 Fifth Avenue, Altoona, PA, in the amount of $102,602, and authorizing the city manager to execute all documents and the city clerk to attest to same. And below, as noted, this expense is not in the 2021 budget. It must be funded with contingency or out of general reserves. Item E is awarding a demolition contract to G&R Excavating and Demolition of Tyrone, PA, for the following properties: 107 South 16th Street, 1530 2nd Street, 1801 6th Avenue, Altoona, PA, in the amount of $63,140, and authorizing the city manager to execute all documents and the city clerk to attest to same. Item F is awarding the hazmat building repairs project for 1747 Margaret Avenue to Clark Contractors of Bedford, PA, in the amount of $202,824.37, payable from the capital budget, and further authorizing the city manager to execute all documents and the city clerk to attest to same. And this expense is a reallocation of the $200,000 in the capital improvement plan for the construction of a hazmat storage building at the Juniata Fire Station. Item G is awarding the Washington Avenue Storm Sewer System project to Geyer Brothers of New Enterprise, PA, in the amount of $191,321.50, payable from CDBG funds, and further authorizing the city manager to execute all documents and the city clerk to attest to same. Are there any additions, deletions, or anything that needs to be pulled for separate vote?
I just, if I can ask a question on letter D, and I guess Ken specifically, I probably would run this by you, and that is if the footnote there that the expense isn't in the budget, and it's going to have to either be funded with contingency or out of general reserves. I just, the question is, since it's not in the budget, I mean, how does that impact us?
Well, I mean, the contingency line item that was added to the budget this year is sufficient to cover the expense. So it's just, but procedurally, normally we would let the council know before going into contingency. If you don't want to use contingency, the city does have general unrestricted cash reserves because we ended the year in the black last year, which are certainly ample to do that. So it's just letting you know this is an unbudgeted expense. But Rebecca Brown clearly feels strongly that we need to eliminate this backlog of properties before they go through upset sale again. And so technically, if it comes out of contingency, is in the budget, it's just a contingency request.
Okay, so, and if you would refresh my memory, what is that, the item, the dollar amount in the contingency as it is now?
Well, I think it
sorry.
was about $257,000, but I just,
That's
I
fine.
can certainly confirm that.
No, that's fine, that's fine. I just wanted to get your take on that and make sure we were gonna be okay. That's really it, so.
I have a question on item F. Note that this expense is reallocation of the $200,000 in capital improvements. Is that the entire amount that we had allocated it for the hazmat storage at the Juniata Fire Station?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a question as well, Ken. So if I go back to letter D that Councilman Kelly was asking about, so is it my understanding that once the demolition contract is awarded, then they will not be on the sale in September, correct? We notify the county and they're taken down off of that list of properties for sale, or that are conditional, the liens are.
Well, the properties themselves still potentially could go to tax sale, but there wouldn't be a structure on those properties. So the tax debt that they owe isn't absolved by tearing the building down or the structure. That property still owes money, but the incentive for someone purchasing, unless they want to purchase as a vacant lot, which certainly could happen. I mean, there's an expense involved in tearing that down, but until the taxes are resolved, and eventually it goes through a process where it ends up in the repository or it ends up in, under the new law, sort of on our responsibility. But yeah, this just avoids having people buy something at tax sale that they can't afford to renovate, occupying it, and then forcing us to take legal action to remove them.
Which costs us more in the long run.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to nip this in the bud now, but we don't take title to the properties.
No.
Yeah, so that's the difference, so, but it's kind of that you can pay me now or pay me later kind of thing.
Well, some of the properties are involved in drug activity. I mean, other kinds, they're clearly a fire risk, a public health risk. So much like with the Second Lutheran property, once it's gone, the problems associated with that greatly diminish.
Thank you.
We ready for the consent vote?
Yep.
Vice Mayor Butterbaugh,
Yes.
Councilman Kashotti,
Yes.
Councilman Carper,
Yes.
Councilman Ickes,
Yes.
Councilwoman Jordan is absent, Councilman Kelly,
Yes,
Mayor Pacifico.
Yes.
The vote passes 6-0. We have two ordinances on the agenda. The first ordinance for introduction is an ordinance amending the code of the city of Altoona by creating Chapter 262, condemnation orders, to implement Act of October 2020, Public Law Number 101, entitled Municipality Condemnation Order Act, as adopted by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to provide for its administration, severability of provisions, and providing an effective date. Is there a council member willing to introduce this ordinance?
So moved.
This ordinance was introduced by Mayor Pacifico. And we have a second ordinance for introduction, which is an ordinance amending the code of the City of Altoona, Chapter 536, entitled Registration of Vacant Buildings, by replacing it in its entirety to create 3 categories of vacant buildings, including 1, neglected buildings, 2, derelict buildings, and 3, unsafe buildings, requiring registration and inspection of vacant buildings to provide for administration, enforcement, and appeals, repeal of all other ordinances or parts of laws in conflict therewith, severability of provisions, and providing an effective date. Is there a motion for adoption? I'm sorry, is there a council member willing to introduce this ordinance? That was Vice Mayor Butterbaugh. This ordinance was introduced by Vice Mayor Butterbaugh.
Okay, moving on to city manager update.
So I hope to be able to provide an update on the COVID-19 vaccinations. The Pennsylvania Department of Health issued modified guidance this morning. Chief Heilman was on that call, and then later rescinded that guidance and said they need to think about it some more. So it's, I wish I could tell you more about where we are. We are doing everything we can to be prepared, whether the strategic direction is to move to mass distribution, which is being discussed at the state level now, or continue through the current method. We have been able to offer vaccinations to our first responders, police and fire, but all other city employees are, like everyone else, waiting to see what happens. Certainly congratulations to Chief Freeling, who has had a career of distinction, 20 years as a police chief, 44 in the same city, is a remarkable record. So this is I guess technically her final council meeting. So appreciate her work. I've informed the council, Deputy Chief Joe Merrill will become the acting chief when she retires effective March 1st. Then we'll be talking about moving forward in terms of the recruitment process and how to proceed to fill that vacancy. Councilman Butterbaugh, Councilman Ickes, Mayor Pacific, and I met with the Champion Life Church and other local pastors to discuss fire inspections at places of worship. It was a little snowy that evening, but I think we had a positive dialogue about the value of the program and some of the advantages it presents to the fire department in particular. So felt like that went reasonably well. I've had a number of issues with our collective bargaining unit that we've resolved lately. So, credit where credit's due. We've been able to iron out some things. Clearly, this is our collective bargaining year. We're not quite ready to move into that, but certainly happy to report that the relationship with the 3 bargaining units has been cordial. I have a presentation with AmBucks tomorrow at the convention center. So just letting you know I'll be there. There's been an uptick in land development recently. We have an application for a recovery house. That's something that we'll be talking about with the city solicitor, potentially the zoning hearings board and the planning commission. Certainly I've had experience with this in other communities, but this is my first go around here with that. We also have a couple other land developments in the pipeline. So the planning commission seated its new member. We had, I think, a crisp and successful first meeting. Kim's going to be helping us out with staffing the planning commission. The planning commission met and confirmed my conditional approvals of the Curry project, which is the old Vipon building, and the redevelopment authority board met this afternoon to approve the amendment of the deed restrictions. So now we're just waiting on some technical corrections to the plan submissions, and that we should be able to wrap all that up. With the departure of some of our staff, we're going to be moving some things around at City Hall for what we hope is improved efficiencies, trying to make sure that we're doing our customer service on the first floor where it's easily accessible to the public, taking some of our quieter functions, moving them to the 4th floor. So, now that we have some elbow room, we'll start moving some people around as we do some rolling renovations. And when we have an empty office, is a good chance to get a coat of paint on to address some of the facilities issues before we start moving people around. But I'll keep you posted as we sort of progress in that operationally. Any questions I can answer for the council?
Thank you, Ken. Moving on to council discussion items. Councilman Carper.
I just wanted to extend a personal thanks and congratulations to Chief Freeling on her years of service, and nothing else at this time.
Councilman Kelly.
No, certainly I'd echo those same comments about the chief, and it's a tough job, and it only gets tougher. And when you look at the landscape across the country, how difficult it is to be in law enforcement and to have that length of a career, I think we're very fortunate to have had someone like the chief with us for all these years, and she will be missed. Discussion items, though, I think one of the things that when we look at what we've done tonight, that's probably the most properties I think we've voted on for demolition at one meeting. And I think we all know what the reality is going to be. There probably, in most instances, will not be anything built to replace those structures. And I think it just further points out that we really need to double up our efforts with some type of a housing initiative in the city to try to create housing for, that people want and that we can use to attract people. Because if not, the erosion will just continue. And I'm sure even with all the ones we voted on, there's probably a long, lengthy list of others that could be added to that list. So I just think that the idea of working on a housing initiative really should move up to the top for us. Thank you, Mayor.
Concur. Thank you. Councilman Butterball.
Yeah, I would like to say congrats to Chief Freeling also, and thanks for your service to the city, and we are very blessed. She has done a great job, and we're extremely blessed to have the police department that we have, and they do a great job and work very hard to keep the city safe. I would agree with Councilman Kelly's remarks there. It was good to see that we are starting to catch up with some of these properties that we're behind on, but the housing initiative is certainly an excellent idea. And I think one of the things that's going to help that idea is our streamlining of the land development process. It's going to make it definitely easier to do work and to develop property in the city. And I think that's a good step in the right direction for that. And also there is, Ken mentioned earlier about the meeting we had with the area pastors. I'd just like to thank Pastor Baldwin and the folks at Champion Life and those that attended that meeting. And thanks to Chief Howman and Inspector Free. They did a great job there explaining the program and the importance of it. And I believe that's everything. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Kashadi.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to follow the thread of congratulating Chief Freeling for just 44 years of excellent service, and as was said earlier, to do all 44 years in one city nowadays is remarkable. And there's people like that are the big reason that Altoona is what it is, and it's gives us a lot of hope for the future too, to stay strong and to be behind the men and women in uniform that are out there on the front lines like we do. So thanks again to Chief Freeling and to everybody out there that's serving. That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Ickes.
Thank you, Mayor. Would anyone like to take a guess what my talking points will be to start? Chief Freeling, thank you for your dedication to the city of Altoona. I have to say, being on city council for a little over a year, the 3 tours that I've done with the Altoona Police Department during the short time I've been on council, I've had a chance to see our officers interact. in a wide spectrum of circumstances, whether it's drug-related, helping someone that may be homeless, children in need, etc. I'm really proud of the officers that we have here at APD, and I think that that's commendable to the culture that we have here at Altoona and the Altoona Police Department. And I look forward to working with Deputy Chief Merrill over the course of the next couple of months. I had a brief conversation actually this morning with the mayor, actually talking about housing stock here in the city. So it's interesting that Councilman Kelly had brought up the discussion here and has been echoed here. And not to sound too much like the retired CEO from Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, but I think talking with developers would be a good starting point for us here at the city level to talk about if there's a way that we could work with them and present some ideas to, I think over 50% of Altoona's housing stock is pre-1940. And for us our long-term plan is not only going to be from an economy standpoint, but it's going to have to come down to the fact that people want to live and raise a family here. And obviously that starts with housing. In recognition of February being Black History Month, I think it's definitely worth noting that our community over the last couple of weeks has lost two real pillars of the community involved with the Blair County chapter of the NAACP. President Dawn Witherspoon, who I had the pleasure of actually getting to know during 2020, actually through COVID. We served on the Pennsylvania 30-Day Fund together, and Dawn was a great asset in helping us raise funds and distribute funds to small businesses that were really adversely affected due to the COVID shutdowns. And I had a chance to talk with his wife, Linda, last week. And I know that Dawn will definitely be missed in this community, and also Virginia Day, who was vice president of the Blair County chapter of the NAACP. So two great representatives for not only the city, but also Blair County and their efforts for civil rights movement. So those are my comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Bill.
Thank you. Could somebody explain the Washington Avenue sewer project? Right, okay.
That one will have to defer to Nate Kissel, who's out on medical leave right now, but that's, I believe, a stormwater management project.
Somebody needs to turn a microphone on.
Oh, sorry, Councilman. That's one where, if Bill, I can have you have Nate Kissel give you a call on that, because he has the scope of work on that project, and I think I'd probably screw it up if I tried to do it ad hoc.
That's fine. Regarding the demolitions, how many more properties are on the list that ought to be demolished besides the ones that you approved today?
This zeroes the backlog out. This gets us caught up. Not to say that, I mean, every day or week that goes by, there's a potential that inspectors will identify a failing structure, but this is the backlog that's accumulated, and this would bring us up to having nothing on the list.
Is there still a CDBG program for that, or has that been?
Yes. No, part of this is that, the work was divvied up where the demo program funded by CDBG, which is a 2-person crew, will be, the end of the CDBG cycle is the end of June. They'll be demolishing houses as well. These are the private sector houses that are being funded, and then they've got 5 houses that they intend to demolish before that June 30th period. And then there's another funding cycle that starts.
So in addition to these, there are 5 houses
Yes.
that are on the CDBG program?
Yes.
Okay. Does the city plan to lien the properties like it does with the CDBG program for cost of demolition?
I mean, it's certainly something we can do, but speaking to Councilman Ickes and Councilman Kelly's housing initiative, the more we pile on these properties, the more difficult it is to convey them to a private owner, the less likely it is that those properties will ever be redeveloped. Because if the property itself is only worth, let's say, $5,000 or $10,000, and there's $25,000 of liens on it, it's difficult to expect that to move. So with the condemnation ordinance that was just introduced this evening, I think we'll be following that, but then it's going to be, I think, a case by case, because in some cases, the goal is to get these properties developed and back on the tax rolls as opposed to be vacant lots that the city mows in perpetuity. So, I mean, the simple fact is that for most of these properties, we'll never recover our costs when they are conveyed back to private ownership.
So you're saying it's sort of a case-by-case thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some cases, because, I mean, there's different lot structures or different sizes. I think what we want to do is try to recover as much for the taxpayers as we can, but we don't want to create a disincentive, because every year we have to maintain these properties. We not only lose the tax revenue, we actually have to pay the maintenance cost.
Yeah, and it's not like we haven't been, in any one of these cases, it's not like we haven't been after the property owners to do things to the property. It doesn't just, overnight, we're gonna tear the property down. There's usually a long history of fines, citations, and chasing after someone, trying to get them to remedy the problem. So it takes a while to get where we are tonight. So, and I agree with you. It would be wonderful if we could get that, but now if you're looking at a 25 by 120 foot lot with a $13,000 lien for demolition, I mean, it's not practical, unfortunately.
It just doesn't make economic sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's unfortunate that people get themselves into circumstances where they have a property that they can't maintain. But, you kind of have to look at it as we're trying to save the rest of the neighborhood. So, because let's face it, if you have a house on your block that's falling down and it's a derelict property, there's not a lot of incentive to want to, keep after your own property. You start thinking about, boy, maybe I should move out.
Does the city still lien the properties in the CDBG portion of the program?
When they're funded by a federal grant, I mean, then we can't, if we recovered monies, we'd have to repay the grant if they're grant funded. But what you saw this evening is if there's a fairly sizable chunk, which is why we're talking about contingency or general reserve, that's money we can recover. If the work was done and funded by a federal grant source and we recovered money, we'd have to send that money back to Washington, D.C., because we don't get to keep it. I mean, then that's been encumbered. So where the CDBG grant funds are used, there's really, at least for us, no incentive to try to collect on that.
Oh, so you don't lien the properties on the CDBG?
Well, on the CDBG, it's being grant funded. So we're using a federal source of funding, which is specifically, one of the uses is blight abatement. So it's essentially, we're getting a grant to do it. I mean, most of these properties, though, have other encumbrances upon them, collections or whether it's been grass mowing or other fees. But ultimately, I think the conversation that I'm hearing that the council wants to have is, how do we incentivize the private sector to come in and do something with these parcels as opposed to have them being sort of perpetually vacant?
Right.
Hey, Bill. Each one of these properties has its own story that comes with it, and sometimes it's somebody that just can't afford to do upkeep, or sometimes it's somebody that maybe they passed away and the family lives out of town and there's nobody to really claim it, or they're just various and sundry reasons here. Like, each one of these properties may have a completely different reason for getting to the point where it did, but it is good to eliminate the blight.
Right. And then, could you say, if you can, what the change that was proposed and then retracted in the in the Department of Health guidelines were today?
Well, I'm just going on what Chief Heilman told me. I think the best thing to do would be follow up with him directly, Bill, just because he was involved in that meeting, and then, you know, we're just, I guess if they rescinded it, the question is that did they mean to send it out, or was it sent out inadvertently? I think the chief can go into much more detail than I can. My understanding is we thought we had new direction, and that new direction was just hold on before we give you a direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Amanda, do you have any? Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
Have a good evening.